Takis McGinnis Elder Care Law. She has worked with the elderly and their families for over 20 years. Her presentations draw on her experiences helping families navigate the long term care system and her role as a guide, encourager, counselor, resource gatherer, and advocate during the journey. So Patty will have a presentation on residents' rights today. I'm going to go ahead and give her the floor. So Patty, whenever you're ready.
All righty, thank you so much, and thank you all for having me today. Um, Today we're going to be talking about resident rights, and this is a subject that's always been kind of near and dear to me, but for several years I worked as an ombudsman here in Middle Tennessee and really got to know resident rights kind of in and out. And so I wanted to share some of those things with you so that you know what to expect if you or any of your loved ones or anyone you know ever is in a long-term care facility. So let's just dive right on in. Um, First off, we're going to talk about the resident's right to be treated with respect. And basically, that means pretty much just what it says there. A resident is to be treated with respect. That means that they get to set their own schedule. If they want to get up in the morning and have breakfast at 7 o'clock, if they would rather, stay in bed and maybe drink a cup of coffee and have breakfast a little later. Things like that. They should be able to have some input in how they set their schedule. Also, how are they talked with? We have a very, especially here in the South, we are so courteous and so polite to our elders, but we do a lot of things like call people honey, baby, granny, that kind of thing, where that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just be sure that it's something that the resident wants to be called. I know I personally would not like being called granny by anybody, just my personal preference. Also, residents have right to privacy. That means they should be able to shut their door when they want to. They should be able to meet with their families privately and have discussions. They should be able to talk on the phone in private. And if they don't have a private room, then there should be a place where they can go that they can have privacy. They have the right to participate in activities.
Hey, Patty.
Right? Yes, ma'am.
It does not look as if your screen is advancing.
Oh, I'm sorry. There we
Okay.
go.
There we go.
All right. So we talked about this one. I'm sorry about that. I was looking at my wrong screen.
All good.
All right. The next one we're going to talk about is the right to participate in activities. And all of our long-term care facilities will offer different activity options. And residents are encouraged to participate in those activities. Should be things that are of interest to them, and there should be a variety of activities so that if what you're doing this morning or what they're doing this morning doesn't work, then maybe what they have this afternoon will. It doesn't have to be group activities either. Residents have the right to do the things that they find most enjoyable and the things that bring them most pleasure. That might be that they enjoy sitting in their room reading a book or looking at magazines or, watching a movie, any of those kinds of things. But the thing to remember is any facility should have a wide variety of activities for the residents to participate in. Next, we're going to talk about the right to be free from discrimination. That's, nursing homes must comply with civil rights laws. That kind of goes without saying. Everyone has the right to be free from discrimination regarding their race, their religion, their preferences. One thing we don't always think about when we're talking about our long-term care facilities is age discrimination. We do that and not even realize that we may be doing those kinds of things. So, consider yourself. Do you automatically raise your voice when you're talking to an elderly person? Do you automatically assume that maybe they don't understand things as well as as well as what you would, because you're young and whatever? So we really have to guard ourselves against that type of discrimination too, not making those prejudgments of people based on anything, their race, their religion, um, their age. Just, everybody, anyway, just no discrimination regardless of what's going on with them. Um, the right to be free from abuse and neglect. That seems pretty self-explanatory, you would think. Um, But that's how it should always be. Residents should always have the right to be free from abuse and neglect. And sometimes that's more than, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are handled roughly. It's easy to tell if someone has been manhandled. They'll have bruises on their arms, or, this, that, or the other. Other things, other forms of abuse are neglect. You're just not doing what it is that is supposed to be going on for this person. Neglect is when someone who's supposed to be taking care of you is not, and their failure to provide you what you need is causing you pain or mental injury. They may not be doing it on purpose, but really it hurts nonetheless. It's the same thing. And abuse is when someone who's supposed to be taking care of you are hurting you. Instead of helping you, they're actually causing you pain and or mental anguish. These are things that, just most definitely should never occur, especially in our long-term care facilities and with our elderly. The right to be free from restraints. And that one, again, I can say should seem like it's pretty self-explanatory. We used to, when I started working in nursing homes, it was not uncommon for residents to be restrained. It was for their safety, for their own protection, but there were chest restraints, where residents had chest vests on that had ties so they could be tied to the chair so they wouldn't fall. Or there might be hand restraints, where they had mitts or something over their hands, to keep their hands from doing different things. Bed rails were used to help keep residents in bed so that they wouldn't fall or wouldn't wander, things like that. But it's been found over time that those restraints end up causing more injury than what they prevent. So especially if anyone has been around many people with dementia, you'll know that residents will find their way out of whatever the situation might be. It's been found that residents will actually be injured more severely in trying to get out of these restraints or trying to crawl out of bed through the bed rails than they would if they had just fallen naturally. So physical restraints are very uncommon, not used much, if at all, in a nursing home setting or an assisted living setting. And on those instances that they are used, it would be just an emergency situation and most likely would not occur in one of our long-term care facilities. Another form of restraint, though, is chemical restraints. Many people have medications that help them with different things, that may have a sedating effect. Maybe they have a diagnosis of anxiety or depression or, any number of different things. Where those medications are good for that person and are needed for that person when they need them, they should never be used to help control a person's behavior. In other words, if a resident is having a difficult time and the staff is having a hard time keeping them occupied or keeping them in their room or doing this or that, it's not, that's not the time for them to be medicated. They are medicated when they will benefit from the medication, not when it's a benefit for anyone else, and never just to calm them down, and uh, so they can be, so that they can sleep it off, so to speak. So we really just need to be mindful that medications need to be used appropriately and as prescribed by the doctor, and not, situationally to help control a behavior like that. Residents have the right to make complaints. I think that's one of the last rights that we lose, because we can always find something to complain about. And as an ombudsman, I can attest to that is true. I've never met a resident that didn't have something they could tell me about that could be improved. Whether it was the food, the services, whatever it might be. But that's their right to make complaints, and it's our right as well. We all have the ability to make complaints and to try to make suggestions for how to improve things. And it's the same for a resident as well. There should be no retribution for expressing their concerns or their complaints. There should be a process to follow to get a complaint resolved. And it's important when you or your loved one is in a long-term care facility that you know what that process is. Because going into any facility, and I don't care what facility it is, there's gonna be something that goes wrong. It's just inevitable, kind of the same way that it is in our own household. Everything goes along just fine most of the time, but every now and then something goes wrong. And when it does, you need to know how to get it taken care of. So it's important for people when they go into a long-term care facility that they know what that process is. Who do they go to if they have a complaint? What do they do if that complaint's not resolved? How do they handle those things? So it comes down to asking questions. Talk to the staff at the facility. Make sure you understand who the person is that you go to. And there is no blanket answer to that, because each facility can be a little bit different from all the other ones. In a lot of facilities, it may be the social worker that handles complaints. It may be the director of nursing that handles complaints. It may be all the department directors, just depending on what the complaint is. So again, it just goes back to finding out who those complaints are to be made to, so that they can be resolved. Residents should also be encouraged to use their voices, and to try, as we all try, to constantly improve our living situation. And hopefully the staff will be right there to help them along and to help them figure out how to find resolution. The right to get proper medical care. That's kind of a big one, but we've got it, broken down a little bit. You should be fully informed about your care, and you should be informed in a way that you understand what's being said to you. Sometimes medical people have the they're explaining things to you, maybe about your situation, about your needs, about your illness, but you may not understand what it is that they're talking about, because they're talking up here and you're, down here as far as understanding. So it's very important that you understand what you're being told. And so we have to be advocates for ourselves and for our loved ones. So we must be sure that we understand and that we ask for clarification so that we understand what care we are receiving. Goes the same with being informed about your medical condition, your prescriptions, your medications. All those questions that you have about those should be explained to you. You should be involved in the choice of your doctor. Now, most facilities, most nursing homes have a medical director that will oversee your care. If there's anyone else that you would like to see instead of that, you have that right to do that as well. May make things a little more challenging as far as getting out to see your doctor, but that is your right to pick whoever it is that you want taking care of you. You have the right to participate in the decisions that affect your care. That means that you should be, it goes along with the next one, you should be involved in developing your care plan. It's your care plan. You're the one that's being cared for or your loved one. So, of course, you should be involved. You know yourself, your loved one, better than they do. So you very much should be an active participant in developing your plan of care and in making the decisions that affect your care. You should have access to all your records and reports promptly. Um, Now, that doesn't mean that you can go up to the nurse's desk today if your loved one is in a nursing home and say, I want a copy of all my mother's records. They have a procedure as well. Now, you should be able to view your records with a nurse. They're looking at you or looking with you and helping you to interpret some of what those reports say. But if you want printed copies, then you need to make a written request for those and allow that process to work. Usually takes around 48 hours to get those records back to you. Express complaints. I think we talked about that, but that follows through with your medical care as well. If you don't like the plan of care that the doctor is outlining for you or that the facility is putting together for you, then you need to let them know, and you need to be an active participant in getting that corrected to where it's something that is doable for you. You have the right to create an advance directive, and that's just the direction on what you want to happen as your health, if your health declines. What situations do you find agreeable and disagreeable? And the very last one on this slide is refuse to participate in treatment. I found this to be one of the most misunderstood rights that we have in facilities, and that's just the right to refuse, flat out just refuse. We all have that right to participate to refuse to participate in our treatment plan. That means if you don't agree with your doctor, you don't do what your doctor says. If it's time for your medications and for whatever reason, you're not going to take those medications, that's your right to say no, and that's your right to not take them. But that's not giving a pass at saying that, oops, sorry, I stood still too long and my lights went out. That's not to say that if a nurse goes in and goes to give your mom her medicine and your mom says no, the nurse just says, okie dokie, and turns around and leaves. The nurse has an obligation to at least explain, why you need to take this medication. And if mom still doesn't want to take that medication, then that nurse, should honor that refusal and just go on. Might want to consider going back in another 20, 30 minutes, see if they can, if things have changed. But we must always remember that residents have the right to refuse. And that goes far beyond just refusal on treatment. It's just a blanket refusal, just like you have that right to say no to whatever. My best example that I use is when I go to the doctor and he tells me I need to lose weight, and I agree wholeheartedly with him. And then on my way home, I stop at McDonald's and supersize my fries and go on about my business. That's my way of refusing his treatment. So kind of look at it that way. It's not always, anyway, just know residents always retain the right to refuse. Okay. The right to have your representative notified. That's kind of a tricky one at times, or it can be, because especially if you're a resident and you're alert and oriented and you take care of your own business and things like that, it's up to you who you want notified of any changes that go on with your condition or anything at all. So long as we are alert and oriented, we have the right to determine who gets information about us. Now, on a practical note, most people in licensed facilities are there because they don't really want to keep up with everything about their life anymore. So most of them do have a family representative that they want to be involved in their care. And so if that's the case, then that representative has the right to be informed of any changes in your physical, mental, or psychosocial status. If you have an accident, if you have anything that comes up, your representative has the right to be notified. Anytime your treatment changes significantly, if you have new medications that are being added, if you have a new diagnosis, if you have medications that are being stopped or a treatment plan that is stopping, you should be informed, your representative should be informed. Also, if the nursing home decides to transfer you or discharge you from the facility, obviously you have the right to be notified of that as well as your representative. But bottom line, if you have a representative that you want involved in your care and you want them notified, they should always be notified about any changes that goes on. But notifying them does not mean that that resident should not also be notified as well. Remember, we have to always guard against and respect a resident's dignity. Okay. We have the right as residents to get information on the services and fees. And that's kind of, to me, that's kind of how business works. You should always know what it is that you're being charged for, what is included in the services that you're paying for. So when you're talking about a nursing home, the nursing home can't require you to pay up front if your stay there is going to be covered by Medicare or by Medicaid. Now, it's a little different if you are a private pay resident. If you're just paying out of pocket, the nursing home can then require you to pay up front. Now, anybody that's seeking admission to the nursing home must be told how they can apply for Medicaid, what they can expect from the program, and also what do they get from Medicare. How do they use Medicare? How do they use the Medicaid benefits? How do those benefits work together? That information should be publicly displayed, and most likely you will get information in your admission packet that goes over all those things as well. If you paid for a service and you are on Medicare or Medicaid, and you paid for a service and now you find that that service is covered by Medicare or Medicaid, the nursing home should provide you information on how to get a refund. That's not, that doesn't happen real often, but it is just something that's included in there, and it is just something I wanted to refer back to. The right to manage your money. You have to consent to the facility holding an account for you, and if they offer that. Nursing homes must offer that service. Assisted living, some may and some may not. So that just goes back down to the facility to determine if they do or not. So you have the right to manage your money, meaning that you should have access to your bank accounts, your financial records. So again, going back a little bit to privacy, if you need access to your accounts or you need to conduct some of your financial business, then you should be able to do that, and your facility should help you find a place where you can be sure that that business is taken care of in a private manner. The facility must have a system that ensures full accounting for your funds, and they must keep them separate. So if you put, say, $100 into your mother's account, that account is going to stay separate, and it's going to say Martha has $100 in this account, and then there'll be a detailed accounting on how that money is spent. The money does not go into a general fund. Everything is all kept separately. And once you leave the facility must return any remaining funds to you within 30 days. Okay. And they also, along the way, they have to let you know what's going on in that account. So you should get regular accountings on what's in the account and how it's been used. The right to spend time with visitors. This is a little tricky these days, coming off of the end of a year-long pandemic where visitation in facilities was not happening, and now that it is, it's very different. It's not as wide open as it was prior to the pandemic. Some facilities are. Most assisted living facilities don't have near the restrictions that they did, so you can come and go fairly easily. The nursing homes, they all are, from what I'm seeing, they're all different, or they can be. Some of them are wide open in that you can come in anytime you want. You still have to go through some of the COVID screenings, but there's no limitation on when you can visit, how you can visit, how long you can stay, where you can visit, and those kinds of things. But some do. The facility where my father is now, you have to let them know 2 hours in advance when you're coming. You can only have 2 people to visit, so there are just some parameters. So it's always important that you find out from the facility where you or your loved one lives what their visitation rules are right now. But so when you have visitors, residents have the right to visit privately with residents or with their family or whoever it is that they want to spend time with. Prior to the pandemic, residents had the right to have visitors at any time, so long as it didn't interfere with provision of care or the privacy of other residents. Now, again, that comes back to the facility and their visitation rules as they stand right now, post-pandemic. They have the right to see anyone who helps them with their legal, their social, or their health services, anyone from outside that comes in and offers them assistance. Again, it falls to the facility to provide that private space for you. When my father first went into a facility, I was allowed to visit him in his room because he was in a private room, but I had to have the door opened. So that did not. I think that happened one time, and then when I went back the next time, I did ask for privacy. And if not in his room, where could I go to visit privately with my father? And so accommodations were made. So sometimes you have to remind staff of some of the rights that we have, and privacy is one of those rights. The right to get social services. Now, the social worker in the facility is a very important person for the residents, or should be an important person for all the residents. I say she, but the social worker is the person that handles many of the resident complaints. They help the resident with their discharge if there's a discharge pending. They'll help the resident with counseling, with problem solving, and they're charged with helping residents find whatever services they need. So if they need help getting an attorney, for instance, or they need a financial advisor or something like that, the social worker can help them get those things done. And it's her duty to help them get those things taken care of. And they're also, I may have said this, but they're usually the one that handles a lot of the complaints. So back to some of the things we talked about before, it's really a good idea to get to know the social worker, who that person is and what their job duties entail, so that you'll know and you can go to them for what's appropriate. But my rule of thumb, if I ever have a question about something for a resident, I'll go to the social worker, because she can usually find what that answer is if she doesn't know it off the top of her head. The right to leave the nursing home. Yep, we do have that right. Just because you're a resident at a nursing facility, that doesn't mean that you're a prisoner of that facility. So you do have the right to leave. Now, you need to check with the facility and also with your provider, whoever it is that's paying for your stay there, to make sure that they're going to cover your bed cost if you decide that you're leaving for a visit. So for most people that have Medicare, if you're in a nursing facility with Medicare as your primary payer, you're there for rehab, and you're expected to be a short-term resident and return home. Leaving is not as simple as just going to the door and heading out. If you leave overnight, it may be that Medicare is not going to pay for that night at the facility. But payment put aside, we do always have the right to leave the nursing home, to go out, to visit our families, to go to a restaurant, to just go and do whatever it is that we want. Also have the right, if we're moving out, obviously, you have the right to leave to leave the nursing home. That's funny to me that that's even included in there. But if you have a question about if you can leave the nursing home and your bed be held for you and paid for by whoever it is that's covering your stay, that's another question I would take back to the social worker and say, hey, if I go home for the weekend, is that going to mess up my Medicare? It's always best to ask questions before so that you know, because they can be expensive answers. If, so next, next we're going to talk a little bit about transfer and discharge. Residents are protected against unfair transfers and discharge. There's only certain reasons that a resident can be discharged from a nursing home. Now, before we go into those reasons, let me just say that for an assisted living facility, the discharge regulations are not this steep. For discharge from an assisted living facility, you're just really given a 30-day notice. And they'll let you know the reason. And you can try to argue it if you want to, but regulatory, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for you to stand on. So they do have the right to discharge when they want, just by giving you that 30-day notice. And that will be outlined in the contract that everyone signs for the assisted living when they move into them. But once you get into a nursing home, it's a little bit different thing. Because a nursing home has the ability to not accept you at the very beginning of your admission. When they get the information from the hospital, they can look it over and say, no, I don't think we're going to accept this person today for whatever that reason is. And they don't even have to have a really good reason. Just, no, we don't think we can meet their needs. But once they accept a person into their facility, they kind of accept them warts and all, so to speak. And once a resident is in the facility for 30 days, they're considered a resident of that facility, and they have protections against unfair transfer or discharge. Now, a facility has the right to discharge if it is necessary for the welfare, health, or safety of you or the other residents. So if you had somebody that was maybe they got very combative, maybe they were having a psychotic episode or something, and they were starting to, I don't know, maybe hit out at other people or at staff members. That's a good reason to discharge that person, and nobody would really want them to stay under those circumstances. So that person would be discharged to where they could get treatment for whatever's going on with them. Another reason is your health has improved to the point that a nursing home is no longer needed. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. The nursing home has not been paid for the services, so you've been kind of skipping out on the bill. They have a right to discharge you for not paying your bill. Or if the nursing home closes, obviously they have a right to discharge you then. But just because they have the right to discharge you doesn't mean that that discharge will happen as they anticipate it will. So the how a person is discharged, they must be given a 30-day written notice. And in that written notice, it must say why it is that they're being discharged. Also included in that notice, they have to have information on how to contact, how to appeal that discharge. So you always have the right to appeal a discharge. And that written notice will give that information, the contact information, who you need to contact, and how to go about filing an appeal. It also a copy of the letter goes to the local ombudsman, who review the letters to make sure that they meet the regulatory criteria for the letters. So just keep those things in mind. If you ever, if someone that you know or you are ever issued a discharge notice from a nursing home, one of the first things you can do if you disagree with the reason for discharge is to file an appeal. Once you file an appeal, that automatically stops the discharge. It halts the discharge until that appeal is heard. And then once the appeal is heard, then you'll be given direction as whether that discharge is being upheld or not. The facility also has an obligation. This is a nursing home again. The nursing home has an obligation to find a safe and appropriate discharge for you. If you're not able to stay at their facility, they must find a facility where you can stay. So it really does become kind of a tricky situation. So again, the best thing to do if you ever feel as though you're being unfairly transferred or discharged is to file an appeal. And I'd also suggest calling the ombudsman for assistance. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right, the right to form or participate in resident groups. Now, assisted livings, again, as I've said, they're a little bit different from a nursing home. They don't have, well, I want to talk about resident councils. And resident councils are groups that you'll find in nursing homes and also in a lot of assisted livings. And the resident council is just what it sounds like. It's a group of residents that get together on a regular basis just to discuss their facility. They make suggestions, maybe on improvements. They may point out some different different areas that they think might need to be improved. It may be that anyway, they can do a myriad of things. But the bottom line is residents have the right to form and participate in groups. And the facility has to help them along if it's a new or if it's a facility and they don't have an existing resident council, they need to help them form one, whatever help that might be needed. The facility is obligated to help you locate where you're going to have your meetings, to set up, flyers or notifications about the groups and things like that. Excuse me. The right to have your family and friends involved. Residents have that right as well. They can have their family, they can have whoever they want involved in their care, in their day-to-day life. It really falls down to the resident, as it does to all of us, to determine who we want in our life and what role we want them to play. So it's just a reminder, again, that facilities have the obligation to help residents with their rights and to be sure that all their rights are observed. And so if they have family and friends that they want involved in their care plan, maybe they want them with their just however they want them involved, the facility should honor that request as well and should make every effort to include family and friends as the resident asks. So here's the information about the long-term care ombudsman. And in case for many people, not everyone knows what an ombudsman is. In short, they are a group it's a federally mandated program, and that program is has someone that visits in all licensed facilities, long-term care facilities throughout the country. We have, in our area, we're in District 5, and we have, right now, I think there's 3 full-time ombudsmen, Melinda Lunday, Marshall Gardner, and then there's another girl who I'm sorry to say I don't know her name. She recently started, but what they do, they go around to all the facilities and they talk with residents and try to find out what, if any, kind of concerns or issues that they have, and then they work with the facility and the resident and the resident's family to help resolve issues. So a good way to utilize the ombudsman is if you've had a problem at a facility, maybe I don't know, maybe coffee is always cold in the morning or something like that, and you've talked and you've talked and you've talked and you just can't get a problem resolved. The ombudsman is a good person to call to come in and investigate those kinds of problems. And now, where some people may look and think, well, cold coffee, that's not very much of a problem. But think about it. If you're somebody that drinks a couple of cups of coffee a day, or even one cup of coffee in the morning when you get up, don't you really want that cup of coffee to be hot? And where it may not seem like a big thing to some people, for me, that's a really big thing. I want my coffee hot. And if I need somebody to help make that happen, then, the ombudsman would do that. Now, don't think that that's the only thing that they're going to help with as well, because they also help with issues, surrounding staffing, um, discharges, just really any kind of problem that you have that comes up in a facility. If you need direction or assistance in resolution, then I would definitely give the long-term care ombudsman a call. And when you go to any of the long-term care facilities, whether it's an assisted living facility or a nursing home, there will be an ombudsman poster in the building. And it should be somewhere where it's publicly displayed and easy to see, so that um, all residents and family have access to the ombudsman contact information. And that's it. That brings me to the end of my portion of the presentation, and just wanted to see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Alrighty, I'm not seeing any comments in the chat. If anyone would like to unmute and ask a question, you're more than welcome to. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, I want to thank you so much, Patty, for coming out and presenting for us. This is some really useful information.
You're quite welcome. And if anyone has any questions, or if I can answer anything, I'm more than glad to. Just feel free to get in touch with me.
I also put Patty's email in my follow-up that I'll send out to everyone. But if there's no questions, you're all welcome. Oh, you're all free to leave. And thank you for attending today. I will go ahead and upload this on YouTube now. And let me stop recording.
All right. Thank